Hello and welcome to session 282 in the AIsafety.com reading group. Tonight we'll be discussing the first part of the article AI Pause Will Likely Backfire by Nora Belrose. Nora Belrose is the research lead at Eleuther AI, and this was posted as part of the AI Pause debate week that was held roughly 2 months ago. We'll be talking about the first part about alignment, and perhaps the next part we will talk about next time. So first, I would like to say thank you to Nora. I think it's really important that the ideas in the AI safety community are scrutinized and we get some feedback, skepticism and criticism of our ideas. And it's hard to do this, and it's something that we should celebrate and appreciate, but also of course engage with critically. I engage critically with Nora's text here. I do that with every single text that we've read. So I'm not singling her out or making an isolated demand for rigor. However, I must warn that when making a presentation of such a text, you unavoidably lose some nuance, and of course I will probably also make some mistakes, and I apologize in advance for that. Nora Belrose starts with a brief discussion of who has the burden of proof when it comes to regulation, and identifies AI as a technology, and because it's a technology, the reference class technologies is one where usually it is a bad thing to regulate it, and in particular to have a pause on it, and that means that the burden of proof should be on those who call for regulations. This is something that is sometimes called reference class tennis, in that some person comes up with a reference class, and it's quite easy for another person to look back, no, artificial intelligence is kind of intelligence like aliens and Neanderthals, and these kind of things are really, really dangerous, or it's like, I don't know, something that is a potential existential risk or something like that, and then the burden of proof is reversed, and we don't actually get anywhere because it's impossible to determine what is in fact the right reference class. So using this outside view without any kind of like going into the matter of what will an AI be able to do is not really informative. The three claims that Nora Belrose presents in order to advance her claim is that if we have a pause, we'll reduce the quality of AI alignment research, we will increase the chance of a fast takeoff, and we will push capability research underground. We'll today be discussing the first two, and probably the last next time. A core concept in Nora Belrose's thought about alignment is feedback loops. And feedback loops are really important. This is both something that Nora Belrose believes that the tighter feedback loops we can get, the better, and possibly also something that people in AI safety believe. So what is the problem here? Well, in general, tight feedback loops are almost tautologically good for science. We really, really want that. And so the Eliezer Yudkowsky and Nora Belrose are probably talking about very different feedback loops. And Eliezer Yudkowsky is saying basically we have no feedback loops. We have only a single chance to get this right. So even if they say the same words, they mean something very different. Now, in order for me to describe my objection to Nora Belrose's argument, I'm going to introduce a new concept, and that is a prison/inmate alignment. So we define this as the kind of alignment that exists between the guards and the inmates in a prison. And there is in fact a substantial kind of alignment between them, because the guards can order the inmates to make shoes or something like that. They can actually make them do useful work. If the inmates are like saying the wrong things or making the shoes wrong or making pornography or whatever you object to, then the guards can stop that. They can correct them. There's corrigibility. There's a substantial amount of control. There are all these kind of things. The thing that we don't have, however, is some deeper sense of alignment. You can call it hearts and minds. And this prison inmate alignment is not something that tries to win the heart of them and minds of the inmates. So this is distinct from other kinds of alignment. You could call it intent alignment, you could call it value alignment, scalable alignment. There's this binary alignment where either you destroy the world or you don't, or it's like a good idea to turn it on, or it's not a good idea to turn it on. I sometimes tongue-in-cheek called it less wrong 2020 alignment, because if you go back to 2020 on less wrong, this was the only kind of alignment that people talked about, even though the term is being used very different now. And of course, the problem with prison inmate alignment is that it has no bearing on existential risk, because if the inmates become dramatically smarter than the guards, then the obvious thing that's going to happen is some kind of revolt, and that the probability increases to 100% as the inmates get smarter and smarter compared to the guards. So that was my a new concept that I'm introducing in order to criticize the arguments that Nora Belarus provides. Nora Belarus talks about alignment and robustness in the first part, and claim that some people dispute that GPT-4 is aligned, pointing to things like jailbreaks. And like, I'm sure some people do that, but I am also quite sure that this is not the main arguments from the area of AI safety that I mostly see. The people like Eliezer Yudkowsky and Bostrom and all these other people talk about things like instrumental convergence, complexity of values, orthogonality thesis, consequentialism, and these kinds of arguments for the fact that GPT-4 is not aligned. Nora Belarus has some thoughts about alignment and robustness and whether they are in tension. I thought to write in reply to this, but in the end I think this has very little bearing on the actual problems with the alignment. Because Nora Belarus is talking about a kind of alignment that GPT-4 really has in a strong sense. With her definition of alignment, then except for robustness, GPT-4 is just about perfectly aligned. And this is, to me, like prisoner alignment, and it's obviously not value alignment. If you put infinite capabilities to something like GPT-4, it is really obvious to me that it would kill us. There is no way I could see humanity survive an infinitely capable GPT-4. As for the term robustness, this is a term that people in AI safety sometimes use for something quite possibly somewhat distinct, which is robustness to a specific kind of out of distribution event, namely the one that happens when the AI has a chance of taking over. The next claim is that alignment is doing pretty well. We are making great strides in alignment, and this may surprise you, but I strongly agree. We are making great strides in what I call this prison inmate alignment. We are like OpenAI is actually working hard and getting some actual real well job done here. I am in general very optimistic about technology, and I think this is something that can create a lot of value, make a lot of people happy, and that makes me happy. I think this is the kind of technology that, if not for the fact that this predictably leads to a takeover, then the intermediate steps are some that make me really happy. I'm very happy that this is being done in that sense. Nora Belarus points out constitutional AI, model-ridden critiques as things that have promise for aligning the very powerful models of the future. And I think this kind of oversight methods in the prison alignment analogy, this is kind of like building better guard towers. And building better guard towers, but not winning the heart and minds of the inmates, is something that I strongly expect will not help us aligning the very powerful models of tomorrow, in particular if the models become sufficiently smarter. Because a constitutional AI will obviously break down, I think, if the models become just unfathomably smarter than us. At some point it will certainly break down. The methods in alignment that we are using for alignment enhance capabilities. So it's not like the two progress bars model, and that is on purpose, and that is not a coincidence. In fact, that is because alignment and capabilities are almost inseparable in Nora Belrose's model. I think it must at some point be easy to separate them. Like, you could imagine that you just, I don't know, run the model twice as fast. If you run the model twice as fast, it's going to be more capable. There's a number of jobs it can do if it suddenly becomes twice as fast. But just making it twice as fast seems very obviously not like an alignment technique. That won't increase alignment very much. An obvious example of this would be if you take something like Chaos GPT, and GPT that is trying to be an agent that is meant to destroy us all. If you run that a lot faster, then like obviously that seems like a bad thing, because it's in a strong sense not aligned with what we want. So in a sense, Nora Belrose's claim here isn't just negating the orthogonality thesis. Like, the orthogonality thesis states that you can combine any level of intelligence with any goal. Sometimes people use moral realism to say that once an AI becomes sufficiently smart, then it will recognize what is truly good in this world and then do that. This claim that it's inseparable, these two things, seem like a much stronger claim, and also a much clearly false claim, in that it's like, we can take the Chaos GPT argument one more time. This seems like if you make that more capable, obviously it's not going to be a good thing. The next claim is that alignment research was pretty bad during the last pause. Pause, of course, because it was not a pause. We just didn't have any proto AGIs to work with, and we don't really need to speculate what would happen in a new pause, because we could just look at the historical record. That's at least the claim, and I think, like, taking at face value, that's probably really false, in the sense that history doesn't repeat itself. Now we know what a GPT looked like, and we can obviously experiment up to the level of GPT-4. Even if we don't train more capable models, we'd be able to like continue into probability research until we truly know everything there is to know about GPT-4. So obviously things would be different a second time around. Also, like, presumably would be more than 10 people at MIRI doing this work. So what did alignment research look like in the before we had GPT-4? MIRI failed, basically. I may quibble that, like, MIRI recognized that there was no way they could compete with $1 billion industry, but mostly I agree. MIRI failed. I concede. Stuart Russell, his agenda basically also failed, as Nora argues. I think the argument consists of a dead link and a link to Rohin's what's it called? A review of Stuart Russell's book, and Rohin disagrees with this interpretation. So while Nora Belrose maybe doesn't argue sufficiently for this case, I find myself agreeing with her. So I will happily concede this point. I think it's fair to say that both MIRI and Stuart Russell failed. Next claim is that Bostrom also failed, and that is fighting words, because that is a statement that I will strongly object to. And I think Bostrom, in fact, did really great work during the last pause. I think you could argue that the strongest part of Bostrom's book, Superintelligence, and his other work is in the strategizing part more than it is in the alignment part. The more narrow you define alignment, the more I think that it is the weakest part, but it's still really great. Nora Belrose disagrees, saying that Bostrom assumed we would manually program in values in our AIs. And you could argue whether like writing the values in a prompt that is pre-printed all other prompts, whether that is programming in values, or whether constitutional AI is programming in values. But this is in fact not something that Bostrom really made a lot of assumptions about. He actually explicitly stated that he would not give much predictions about this, because that would obviously be an info hazard. He talks about the alignment technique of manually programming in values. He spends a paragraph on it and ends up saying this is hopeless, but as Bostrom always does, he puts in a footnote and says, maybe there is in fact a way to make this work. But in general, this is he believes that this is hopeless, and so stating that this is Bostrom's thesis is very wrong. Nora Belrose makes a very hard claim even, that everybody agrees that classical AI safety research is net negative, and I think that is this kind of consensus building is obviously very wrong, and I don't think it deserves like a full reply. The closest I can get is that from reading Nora Belrose's argument, I think this argument from Bostrom in a decade ago is probably close to what I think is the key conceptual thing that Nora Belrose is missing in order to like a kind of a crux to get close to where I am. Also, one more thing I wanted to say here is Robert M. From Less Wrong posted a reply to this with, and I just want to flag here that at least some of it I strongly disagree with. So even though I in general disagree with Nora Belrose on this point, then I think Robert M. makes a poor argument against Nora, but I won't go into the details of that here. Next argument is the feedback loop of fast takeoff. And fast takeoff is bad because it makes the alignment feedback loop a lot worse. So that is the a claim, and the claim I think would be disputed kind of by many people in AI safety, in that there is in fact no feedback loop, because you go from 0 to 1 in the number of AIs that are capable of taking over the world, and like there is no feedback loop. You have to get it right on the very first try. Again, Nora argues that everybody agrees with her, and I think that is like wrong. In particular, I would again point to Nick Bostrom's book Superintelligence, which talks about the difficulties of control during a fast takeoff rather than the difficulty of improving alignment. And another example that she another argument for this is she points to Sam Altman as someone who agrees with the statement that fast takeoff is bad because we get a bad feedback loop. And I think in particular, this is perhaps somewhat ad hominem, but I think Sam Altman may be the person in the world who has the greatest financial interest in against AI safety. So I think that is not something that really updates me. Slow takeoff is a default, so don't mess it up with a pause. So the argument here is that we won't have a sharp left turn. We'll just see the capabilities go up, and they scale as a power law in the amount of compute that is used to train it. We had Jared Kaplan, I think precisely 2 years ago, when he presented this graph about how the loss decreases as a function of how much compute used to train it. And this is very different from capabilities, because this is like, you cannot from the level of loss infer very much about the capabilities. We've seen sometimes that this is very discontinuous, for instance with grokking. And grokking is something that Nora Belrose points out has been disputed, and that these emergent capabilities are in fact quite predictable. I think grokking is pretty well established, but some people disagree, and I think that's fair enough. And the people that Nora Belrose points to are people who show that they can find a metric afterwards that show that the capabilities have in fact been increasing in a reasonably continuous way. So I think like it is certainly possible to do this in a post-hoc way, but that's not really important. The important thing is that if you believe that these capabilities are predictable, then you ought to like come up with predictions. Can GPT-5 drive a self-driving car? Or what would be, will GPT-7 be able to de novo create a new super virus or something like that? Like, I dislike people who say that they can predict the future and then don't give any predictions. Like, they should like open a prediction market or something like that. And I think the obvious reason why people are saying that they are able to predict it but don't give any predictions is because they are dramatically overconfident. And I would specifically challenge Nora to give some predictions about what GPT-8 can do if she thinks this is eminently predictable. So, will the takeoff in fact be slow or fast? Well, we can certainly say that if you assume that GPTs have been used to, in some wide sense, self-improve for like probably a year, probably two, or something like that, then by default, then by definition, we are in a takeoff, and we've been in takeoff for like a year or something like that. So the entire takeoff is going to be slow. Can we, from the fact that so far the takeoff has been slow, infer that the rest of the takeoff will also be slow? And I think there's a strong anthropic argument to be made here that just because so far it's been slow, like if it had been fast, we wouldn't be here to observe it. So obviously, when we look back, we see that that so far it's been slow. The second main part of Nora Belro's article is alignment optimism. AIs are white boxes. So before we dive into the argument, I just want to talk a bit about what is meant by the term black box and white box. The terminology, as far as I could tell, has been invented by William Cower in 1941. It's a bit more complex than that, but roughly. So a black box is one where you look at it in terms of the inputs and outputs and don't have any knowledge of the internal workings. And a white box is one where you have the inner components and logic available for inspection. And so these are terms that have been used very much about when talking about AI. And I think, like, it's of course a bit dangerous to talk about what is the conventional view. It's possible that I'm wrong here, but the way I see it is that deep learning models, people very, very often call them black boxes because, like, you have a billion floating point numbers and you can't tell what any of them do, but you can put in something, a prompt, and then you get some continuation of that, and then that's like the definition of a black box. How about humans? Are humans black box or white box? There is a sense that I have some kind of privileged access to my own values. Like, I can say that I'm aligned to my wife, or I can say that I value humanity or something like that. Like, I don't claim that I have a perfect model of my own values. I think, in fact, I'm leaning towards having a very bad internal model, but the conventional view, if you ask the man on the street if he knows his own values, he will certainly say yes. So the conventional argument is that humans are white boxes in this sense, behaviorism notwithstanding, and deep learning models are black boxes. And when Nora Belrose is arguing for the opposite, that human alignment is black box, then I would like some kind of recognition that this is the opposite of common sense, and maybe some kind of answer to my objections that it really seems like I have some kind of idea about what my values are. The argument is on a more neurological level that we have a hard time like scanning the individual neurons and figure things out from that. So we have to do things like role models, rewards, punishment, things like that in order to change each other's values. This is something that works reasonably well, but is unreliable. And just because it doesn't work well, it is kind of like infer that means that our values are like a black box. I think this is in general a really hard philosophical topic to talk about, like what are human values and human alignment. And I think when you're trying to make a very strong statement, in this case like literally that white is black, then you need to like put in far more effort in writing an argument to justify such a strong conclusion. The next claim is that status quo alignment methods are white box, which is also an interesting claim. Like we have full read-write access to something like GPT-4. So in that very narrow sense, it's kind of like a white box, because we can in fact inspect every single number, but we don't know what they mean. And so I think Nora Belrose should try to answer the obvious objection that these are just inscrutable matrices. And the example that she gives as a way to align the current models is by using things like backpropagation. And this is again something that seems like a very peculiar definition of alignment. Certainly if you went to Less Wrong in 2020 and say, hey, I have an idea for a new alignment method, let's use backpropagation, then people would find that very, very strange, and people would obviously tell you that backpropagation is not an alignment method. Nora starts talking about an algorithm called gradient descent and tries to explain like at a basic sense what that is, and like I'm hoping that we could get to a somewhat higher level, but ends up with the argument that gradient descent favors the simplest solution that works well, and use this as an argument for things like murder plots. If it's not useful for improving human feedback on your actions, then gradient descent will make it less likely. And that is I think that's plausibly true, but the problem is that one of the things that humans want to know from these AIs are, like, I have literally asked GPT-4, how do you take over the world? And not actually GPT-4, but I think this is something that a lot of people have asked it, and it's really, really clear that it does in fact have a good understanding of this topic. And obviously, because like it gets good feedback, because this is the kind of thing that people want to know. So obviously it's not something that gradient descent is going to make it forget. And like we can see that like this is not a theoretical argument. We can be very sure that GPT-4 does in fact know really well how to take over the world. Like, I'm not saying that it's a it has a good model. I'm not saying it's capable of taking over the world. I can say that gradient descent has certainly not removed this knowledge in any meaningful sense. And the problem is also here on a higher level that what we probably want to use these AIs for is alignment research. And we wanted to use it to stop an eventual takeover if we get some kind of unaligned AI. And like, how are we supposed to use it to stop a takeover if we are using some alignment method to remove the knowledge of how to take over the world? Then it will be useful for that purpose. So I think there's a contradiction in terms here, and we will, if we want to use it to stop people from taking over the world, we cannot erase the knowledge of how to take over the world. Finally, we get a new argument that for alignment optimism, white box alignment in nature, and I must confess at this point, I don't really understand this argument. Like, I'll try to reproduce it here as like my best guess of what Nora is saying, but like there's a very strong probability that I'm making mistakes here. In particular, when I read her description of this argument, it seemed to revolve around the word instincts, but Nora did not use the word instinct. So I'm going to present it using this word, but it is possible that she meant something else. So the argument is that all animals that have brain basically have instincts. And instincts are some simple and quite understandable white box rules that for information compressing reasons, like the genome needs to implant that in brains, even though the brains are more complex than the genome. And for that reason, the instincts need to be reasonably simple. And these instincts are really strong. And they are also both for animals and for humans. And in particular, these simple, understandable rules set motivations reliably for every human. So both the word reliable and every are included in this text. And I think in order to get to the next conclusion, we need one more statement, which is that our motivations don't come from other sources than instincts. And in this case, it can be claimed that humans are aligned to the objects of our instincts. And that again requires that it doesn't come from other sources. And if that is true, that humans are aligned to the objects of our instincts, this is an argument that an AI that is roughly at the human level could also be aligned using some kind of simple rules that are kind of like instincts. I'll note here that we care about scalable alignment. That's the thing that, like, GPT-4 is not going to kill us. The later superhuman models are, and we don't really care that much about the human level. And Nora Belrose concludes that we are the instincts of AI. That sentence, of course, does not make sense in the sense that I'm not an instinct, I'm a human. Like, it is possible that I just misunderstand. Here is the actual sentence that Nora Belrose uses. When it comes to AIs, we are the innate reward system. And again, I'm not a reward system, I'm a person. I am confused about what is the purpose of this argument, what it implies, whether it's valid. And I think when we are dealing with something that may threaten the future of humanity, we should expect and demand higher quality arguments. That is all for today. Thank you and see you next time.